Greetings, class. This lecture is titled Benjamin Church and King Philip's War, and it is intended for a American History Part 1 survey class. So today I want to talk to you about a guy who I think is one of the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. His name is Benjamin Church, and he lived in New England in the late 17th century. When we talk about somebody in this class, I want you to look at a couple things. I want you to look at how they are immediately relevant. In other words, what did they do or what events are surrounding their life that is significant to the time period in which they live? And then how are they relevant today? So is this guy, Benjamin Church, that we're fixing to talk about, how is he still important today? Is he worth studying because of a bigger picture? Is there a bigger idea associated with this guy other than just the events that happened in his life? Keep that in mind as I talk about him, and we'll get to some things too that how modern times we might not look at this guy the same way as they did back then. All right, so before I can talk about Benjamin Church, I need to talk about the Pequot War. Okay, so the Pequot War was a war between the English settlers of New England and a Native American group called the Pequots. And this was the first major conflict between the Indians and the English in New England. This war took place in the 1630s, and it was a fairly short war, but it was fairly bloody, and I'll tell you why when we get to the end of the war. So this war starts, and there's a couple of different reasons that it happens. The English are expanding. There's some issue with trade between the English and the Dutch. The Pequots were actually the most powerful Native American group in New England at that time, and the way the English were trading with anybody they could trade with were actually causing some problems with the established order that was there before European contact. Disease had hit the Pequots and weakened them severely. So there's a lot of factors involved into what actually causes the war, and you can read more about that in Chapter 2. But what's important to realize, all right, and we're establishing this context to get to talking about Benjamin Church, is the Pequot War was a very difficult war for the English, at least initially. And so the English, when they fought the Pequots, they thought it was going to be easy. And there were several reasons they thought that. For one, they knew what the Spanish had did in the previous century. And the idea was that the Spanish had conquered the Incas, the Aztecs fairly easily. And so they thought they could do the same. They thought that their weapons would make them superior. They thought that their Europeanness, their Englishness would make them superior. And of course, the Puritans, you have to understand, really believed that God was on their side. And so when they get involved in this war, it turns out that the Pequots won't fight the way that the English want to fight. And it's difficult for the English. And in fact, it's not until the English get Native American allies that they're able to really take the fight to the Pequots. And that's what happens. The English are able to get a couple of different groups, the Mohegans, the Narragansetts, and they're able to go make war on the Pequots. And this culminates in the English surrounding a group of Pequots, several hundred Pequots, in a village in Mystic. And they basically end up burning the village to the ground, and any Indians that try to escape the fire, the English kill them. And so the English actually slaughter several hundred Pequots at this Mystic massacre. A little while after that, there's another battle that takes place in a swamp, and more Pequots are killed. And eventually the Sachem of the Pequots, a guy named Sassacus, he goes to the Mohawks. All right, now the Pequots are an Algonquin group. The Mohawks are an Iroquoian group, but the Pequots, Sassacus, their leader, goes to the Mohawks to get help, and the Mohawks actually behead him and send his head back to the English. And so that ends the Pequot War, and it's a big victory for the English, and it sort of establishes an English dominance in New England. And the English believe that their victory was divine. They attribute their victory to God's will. and they make a lot of comparisons between themselves and the Israelites and the conquest of Canaan that's established in the book of Joshua. So just like in Joshua, when the Israelites attacked Jericho and then went on to conquer the rest of Canaan, and they had, orders to kill everybody, the English were able to justify what they did to the Pequots biblically. Now, we can argue, were they right to do that? Obviously, the Indians didn't sail across the ocean to England and attack the English. The English are the ones that came to North America and fought these Indians. So today, we might not view something like this massacre the same way the English Puritans did, but the Puritans did have a biblical mindset that they used to justify what they did. They believed they were coming into the promised land, and in order to achieve their goal of establishing a city on a hill, this is something that they felt they were justified in doing. All right, so that's the Pequot War. This 1636. So fast forward about 40 years to the 1670s. All right, and we're going to get another war. This war is called King Philip's War or Metacom's War. And if you don't know, King Philip is not a European king. He is an Indian. His name is Metacom. Sometimes it's spelled Metacomet, but he is the Sachem of the Wampanoags. And he is the son of Massasoit, which, if you know the story of Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving Indians and all that, that was Massasoit. So what's interesting is when we have this war 40 years later, King Philip's War, Metacom's War, the Indians that the English had to fight are their friends, or the ones that have been their friends since they got there. So whereas in the Pequot War, Indian allies was really the turning point of that war, the problem in King Philip's War is the English are fighting the Indians that have been their friends. Now you have to get into the causes of that. Why are they fighting their friends? Well, it's complex. The English were expanding. They weren't necessarily treating the Indians as equally as they sort of established when they first got to America. And so there's a lot of problems about why this happens. But the point is, the English do not have Indian allies because their Indian allies are the ones they're actually fighting in King Philip's War. And so just like the previous war, the war is not going well for them. They're having trouble fighting these Indians. And part of the reason is because it's their former allies. And because it's their former allies, these Indians are armed with the same weaponry that the English have. And these are the Indians that are close to them and the ones that are supposed to be their friends. In fact, the Narragansetts, the ones that helped them fight the Pequots, are one of the enemies of the English in King Philip's War. So there's a lot of problems in this war, but there's a turning point in the war, and it's really two things. There's two things that happen in King Philip's War that turn it into favor of the English. All right. Now, the first of those is that the Mohawks, so that Iroquoian group we talked about before, the Mohawks create an alliance with the English. And in truth, that was probably all they needed. The Mohawks coming to the aid of the English, that probably would have accomplished everything they needed to accomplish right there. The Mohawks were pretty bad dudes when it came to war, and the being on the side of the English definitely helped them out, and we will see them again throughout this course that the Mohawks and the English have a tight relationship. But the other turning point involves that guy named Benjamin Church. So let's talk about that guy, Benjamin Church, real quick. Benjamin Church, his father fought in the Pequot War, okay, 1630s. Benjamin Church was born in America, and that's important. Let me tell you why it's important. This is the big picture, okay? Benjamin Church would have identified as English. He would have considered himself a Puritan. He would have called himself English. To him, he was English. And he was. But he was born in America, and that makes a difference. Because that first group of people that fought, the people that fought in the Pequot War in the 1630s, they were English. They came from England on a boat. But in Benjamin Church's generation, there's a lot of guys who weren't born in England, They're English, they speak English, they look English, they have English culture, but they're born in America, and their perception of England is not the same as it was for the generation before them. They identify as English, but they're not from England. They're from America. And so their worldview, the way they see the world, even though they see themselves as English, the way they see the world is different than the Englishmen who came here from England. And so their perception of Native Americans, their perception of what it's like living in this new world is much different than people who grew up in Europe and then, came to America. And that's important. So what happens with this guy, Benjamin Church, is he ends up living on the frontier. And on the frontier, his friends and neighbors are the same Indians that he ends up fighting in King Philip's War. So remember, before King Philip's War, these Indians, the Wampanoags, were the friends of the Puritans. And so he's friends with these guys. And he learns to hunt with these guys. He learns how to move through the woods with these guys. He learns, certain skills they have. He learns some of their language. And so he's very much able to adopt certain elements of Native American culture. And he's not as, he doesn't abhor it as much as other Puritans do, even ones in his own life that are living on the frontier, or that don't live on the frontier, but being on the frontier and being born in America and raised in America, his worldview is different. Okay, so this war breaks out, and again, the English are having trouble fighting the war. And Benjamin Church is kind of outspoken about this, and he goes, "Hey, we're doing this wrong. This is not how you need to fight these Indians." And people kind of tell him to shut up and things like that, and they kind of get annoyed with him. And eventually, they say, "Fine, take some guys, make your own little company, do whatever you want with them." And so Benjamin Church recruits these men. And then he goes to these Indians that are his neighbors. Now, this is important. Before the war, when they find out there's going to be a war, when the war starts, he goes to his neighbors and he says, "Hey, we're at war, and, I like you guys, and I don't want nothing to happen to you. So I will do everything that I can to make sure your homes aren't attacked." Because they used to burn homes all the time. That's how you fought a war. You went and burned the other guy's homes, his crops, all that stuff. And so Church says, "Hey, man, I'll try to make sure your home don't get burned." And these Indians that are his buddies say the same thing. They say, "Hey, yeah, we'll try to look out for your stuff." Well, then when he gets this commission, he goes back to these guys and he goes, "Hey, I've got a commission. I'm building a company. I would like you to train my men how to fight like you guys do." And so these Indians that are his friends and neighbors, but are technically his enemies at this point, switch sides, join Church's group. They train his men, and it's Church's company that actually tracks down and kills Metacom, and tracks down and kills Metacom's war chief, Anawan, which is on two different occasions. So two different occasions, Church's company tracks down and kills the two leaders of this enemy that they're fighting. Now, controversy here, okay? Because for most of American history, we would look at this guy, Benjamin Church, as a hero. In fact, Benjamin Church is considered the father of American ranging, and ranging is specialized guerrilla warfare that grew up in America. America sort of created this. It's a hybrid of Native American and European warfare. That's what Church did. He combined the European elements and the Native American elements into a specialized fighting soldier. And this is where we get our modern day special forces, our green berets, our Army Rangers, even our infantry tactics are based off of this. So Benjamin Church is very important, all right, for starting this idea, and his being receptive to Indian culture and adapting certain things from the Indians, all right, helped create what the American soldier is. All right, but the controversy is, clearly this guy made a name for himself fighting Indians. And for most of American history, we would see this guy as a hero. But if people really knew about Benjamin Church, if they knew him today, because a lot of people don't know who he was, but if they did, would he be attacked? Because clearly today, people don't like the idea of Christopher Columbus and don't think Christopher Columbus should be, venerated in any way because of, the negative. So here's this guy, Church, who fought Indians. All right. Would he be uh, looked down upon today as some type of villain instead of a hero? But what you need to look at is the context of when he lived and understand that this guy was much more appreciative of Indians than most of the people that he would have identified with as his own in the time that he lived. All right, so I want you to think about those things. What he was relevant then, obviously. He's relevant today because our modern tactics are sort of traced back to him. But is he a hero or is he a villain or is he just a guy who did something amazing? So keep that in mind and look forward to the next lesson. Thank you.